Welcome back to the Brighter Black Futures podcast. I'm your host, Bisa, and today I'm continuing my deep dive into Black history with a focus on LGBT Black folks, queer folks in the Black community who are doing big things as activists to make changes for all of us that will make the community better and more inclusive. So, without further ado, let's get into it. And now it's time for the upliftment segment of the show. This is a segment where I share a quote that uplifts me and makes me feel good and also teaches me something and ties into the theme of today's show. And today we're talking about LGBT activists. And so I chose a quote from a great Canadian woman. Her name is Dr. Omisore Dryden. She is an academic and a researcher at Dalhousie University, currently in the School of Medicine there, and she's awesome. And this is a quote that was taken from an article where they asked her the question, how do you define Black liberation? And what she had to say was so amazing and so beautiful that I want to share with all of you. So here it is. Black liberation is when we live our full selves in community with one another. It is a vibrant anti-colonial practice that supports us in living through our contradictions in the fullness of our freedom. We make community outside of, beyond, and against current colonial systems and practices. We practice real restorative justice. We engage in vibrant, outrageous, always consensual sexual freedoms, and we always stand against injustice, regardless of the uniform it wears or how comfortable it may feel. That quote says all the things, doesn't it? I want to read it all for you again, just to make sure we all got it. So in her view, Dr. Omisore Dryden's view, Black liberation is when we live our full selves in community with one another. It is a vibrant anti-colonial practice that supports us in living through our contradictions in the fullness of our freedom. We make community outside of, beyond, and against current colonial systems and practices. We practice real restorative justice. We engage in vibrant, outrageous, always consensual sexual freedoms. And we always stand against injustice, regardless of the uniform it wears or how comfortable it may feel. Beautiful. So what resonates in that quote for me is her discussion of community and engaging in a way that promotes all our freedoms, allowing us to be our whole selves, pushing against structures in society that oppress us, colonial practices that oppress us and hold us down. And the part that really makes me raw and feel really good is the part where she discusses fighting against injustice, always standing up against injustice, always, no matter the uniform it comes in or how comfortable it may feel. And for me, what I love about that idea is the fact that sometimes injustice comes from within our community and we do it to each other, and it may be comfortable to be with a person or around a certain group of people in some ways and totally uncomfortable in others, and having the courage to speak out against it when it's people who look like you or are in your family or in close contact with you is really hard, but we do it anyway to make sure that we move forward together and that everybody in our community has a seat at the table. And that, for that reason, I love that quote. I think it's so rich and so full of all kinds of awesome, and that Dr. Omisore Dryden hit the nail on the head and is great for having shared the blessing of that quote and those ideas with us. So I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I do and you learned something too. And on to the next segment. And now it's time for the Black History Moment, the extended segment of the Black History Moment for this episode. And today, like I said, I'm going to do deep dives into the lives and stories of some great LGBT activists in the Black community throughout history. And the first person, for four in total, that I want to share with you is the story of Audre Lorde, who I've known about since I was 19 back in the women's studies class at school. She's amazing. And here is her story. Now, Audre Lorde was born on February 18th, 1934 in New York City to immigrant parents from Grenada as Audre Geraldine Lorde. She was a prominent member of the women's and LGBT rights movement, and her writings called attention to the multifaceted nature of identity and the ways in which people from different walks of life could grow stronger together. She grew up in a household with two sisters and quickly learned the value of her voice and expression. And though she was reserved as a child, she often reflected on her experiences in her writing. Though her life was marked by the challenges of being a black lesbian in a world that often sought to silence her, she embraced her identity wholeheartedly. Starting at the age of 12, she began transforming her struggles into powerful poetry that would later resonate with countless others. Now, Audre Lorde was born on February 18th, 1934, in New York City to immigrant parents from Grenada as Audre Geraldine Lorde. She was a prominent member of the women's and LGBT rights movement, and her writings called attention to the multifaceted nature of identity and the ways in which people from different walks of life could grow stronger together. She grew up in a household with two sisters and quickly learned the value of her voice and expression. And though she was reserved as a child, she often reflected on her experiences in her writing. Though her life was marked by the challenges of being a black lesbian in a world that often sought to silence her, she embraced her identity wholeheartedly. Starting at the age of 12, she began transforming her struggles into powerful poetry that would later resonate with countless others. Audre's experiences shaped her writing as she often wrote about the intersection of race, gender, and sexuality, addressing issues that affected marginalized communities around the world. Lorde's first collection of poetry, The First Cities, was published in 1968 and showcased her unique voice and perspective. It was well received, marking the beginning of her influential career. That same year, she earned a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts and became the writer-in-residence at Tougaloo College, a historically black college in Mississippi. There, she discovered her love of teaching and met Francis Clayton, a professor of psychology, and her partner until 1989. Audre was a prolific writer who sealed her reputation as a formidable poet and intellectual by publishing many more works of poetry and prose throughout the 70s and 80s, including works like Cables to Rage 1970, Black Unicorn 1978, Zammy, A New Spelling of My Name in 1982, and Sister Outsider, Essays and Speeches, a work that included her canonical essay, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, further solidifying her legacy as a pioneering figure in feminist literature. Unfortunately, Audre was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1977, and she found that the ordeals of cancer treatment and mastectomy were shrouded in silence for women and found them even further isolating as a black lesbian woman because the narratives of hope and healing she encountered were all focused on white heterosexual women. In an effort to combat the silence and to foster connection with other women of color and lesbian women who were having the same struggle, Lorde offered a raw portrait of her pain, suffering, reflections, and hope in the book entitled The Cancer Journals, which was published in 1980. That book went on to earn the American Library Association's Gay Caucus Book of the Year Award for 1981 and became a classic work of illness narrative. Throughout her life, Lorde held various teaching positions, sharing her knowledge and passion for literature with students at institutions like the National University of Mexico and Connecticut College. She believed in the importance of mentorship and the need for diverse voices in academia. Her teachings were infused with her personal experiences, encouraging students to embrace their identities and express themselves authentically. Lorde's activism extended beyond the classroom. She participated in numerous protests and movements advocating for civil rights, women's rights, and LGBT plus rights. Then in 1989, with Barbara Smith and several other women writers, Lorde founded Kitchen Table Women of Color Press. The Kitchen Table was devoted to promoting feminists of color and their writings. Lorde was also a founding member of Sisterhood in Support of Sisters in South Africa, an organization that advocated on behalf of women living under apartheid. Lorde received many honors throughout her career, including the 1990 Bill Whitehead Memorial Award and the 1991 Walt Whitman Citation of Merit, making her the Poet Laureate of the State of New York for 1991 and 1992. Posthumously, Audre was elected to the American Poets Corner at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City in 2020, and the Publishing Triangle Association instituted the Audre Lorde Award for Distinguished Works of Lesbian Poetry in 2021 to pay tribute to her legacy. Lorde passed away in 1992 after her cancer returned, but her influence endures. Her writings continue to inspire new generations of activists and poets, and as demonstrations of the importance of speaking one's truth and embracing one's identity. And that's the story of Audre Lorde. If you have not yet heard about her, this is the first time. I can't There aren't enough words for me to emphasize how great it would be for you to check out her works and learn more about her and her writings. She's a phenomenal poet and writer and really contributed a lot to activism for women's rights and for LGBT rights, and also for helping marginalized communities and Black communities. A great, great writer and a prolific writer as well. Now, the second activist I'd like to tell you about is Simon Tseko Nkoli, who was a gay activist and anti-apartheid leader who fought for freedom and social justice in South Africa during the anti-apartheid struggle. His courage to live openly as a gay man, coupled with his fierce activism in the anti-apartheid movement, helped shift the anti-apartheid struggle and the gay liberation movements in South Africa. By living his truth and embracing both his identities, Nkoli facilitated a crossover of the anti-apartheid and gay liberation movements, demonstrating how these two struggles shared common ground in their fight for equality. Nkoli was integral in founding a number of major gay rights movements and organizations in South Africa, including the Gay Association of South Africa, also known as GASA, and most notably the Gay and Lesbian Organization of the Witwatersrand, or GLOW. His efforts laid the foundations for South Africa to become the first country in the world to constitutionalize the protection of the rights of LGBTQ+ people. Nkoli was born in Soweto on November 26, 1957, as one of 4 children. His upbringing was marked by the harsh realities of apartheid, which systematically oppressed Black South Africans. Despite these challenges, Nkoli showed resilience from a very early age. He was educated at local schools and developed a passion for activism, influenced by the political climate surrounding him. Nkoli became aware of his sexuality during his youth and faced the dual challenges of growing up as a Black man in a repressive society while also confronting the stigma associated with being gay. After completing his education, Nkoli became involved in various anti-apartheid organizations. He joined the African National Congress, or ANC, and participated actively in protests against the apartheid regime. His activism eventually led to his arrest during a protest in 1983, where he was charged with treason. While in prison, Nkoli used his time to reflect on his identity and the intersectionality of the struggles he was a part of. His activism began to embrace not only racial justice, but also sexual orientation rights. Upon his release, Nkoli emerged as a prominent figure in both the anti-apartheid movement and the emerging LGBTQ+ rights movement in South Africa. He co-founded GASA, the Gay Association of South Africa, in 1988, and under his leadership, the organization campaigned against discrimination and violence directed at LGBTQ+ individuals, making a significant step forward in the fight for acceptance within a society deeply entrenched in homophobia. In 1990, Nkoli played a pivotal role in establishing the Gay and Lesbian Organization of Witwatersrand, GLOW, which became a key organization for LGBTQ+ rights in Johannesburg. GLOW worked tirelessly to address issues such as hate crimes, healthcare access, and legal protection for LGBTQ+ individuals. Nkoli's ability to articulate the struggles that faced Black South Africans and LGBTQ+ individuals resonated widely, garnering support from various civil society groups. Nkoli's activism was, of course, not without personal sacrifice. He faced immense backlash from conservative factions within society, including threats to his life and safety. Despite the immense challenges he faced, he remained undeterred, understanding that the fight for equality was larger than any one individual's struggle. His courage inspired many others to come out and advocate for their rights. Nkoli's work eventually attracted international attention, highlighting South Africa as a battleground for both racial and sexual liberation. As apartheid came to an end in the early 90s, Nkole's vision for a democratic South Africa included protections for LGBTQ plus individuals. His advocacy contributed significantly to the inclusion of sexual orientation in South Africa's new constitution, making it the first country in Africa to do so. Nkoli continued his work beyond apartheid, focusing on issues like HIV/AIDS awareness within LGBTQ plus communities. Nkoli passed away on June 30 of 2018, but his impact on South Africa's history and LGBTQ plus rights continues to inspire generations seeking equality and justice. His life exemplifies the power of living authentically and fighting for one's rights while advocating for a more inclusive society. And that is the story of Simon Seko Nkoli. If you've not heard about him and this is the first time, again, take some time, do some Googling, and learn about this man and all the work he did to contribute to the betterment of his society, betterment of the lives of Black people in South Africa, and also people who are LGBT plus. Now, the third person I want to tell you about is Perlina Alcock, or Pearl Alcock, as she was more widely known. This woman had a great deal of trauma in her life, including a loveless marriage while she was living in Jamaica, and even lost a child, but she went on to become a woman of note in Britain who was a club owner and an artist. Now, Pearl Alcock was born in 1934 in Jamaica, and she eventually moved to the UK in 1958 at the age of 25, leaving behind her husband, again, who she had a very loveless marriage with. And at the time, she was armed with only £5 and unwavering determination to change her future and take control of her destiny. Despite the daunting challenge of starting life over again in a brand new foreign country, Pearl's ambition set her on a remarkable path. As a fearless and very resilient woman, Pearl quickly established herself as a serial entrepreneur in her new homeland. Initially, she worked as a maid in Leeds, and then she went on to open a dress shop at 103 Railton Road in Brixton during the 1970s. Beneath her shop, she also operated her most famous venture, an illegal shebeen that became popular within the local gay community and was a groundbreaking establishment for its time. Now, for those of you who don't know, a shebeen is basically an unlicensed or unauthorized establishment serving liquor. So she had an underground club and party space for people in the LGBTQ plus community who were living in Brixton at that time. Now, Alcock herself was a bisexual woman, so she deeply understood what it was like to live in a society rife with homophobia and not be able to express yourself fully. So she started her shebeen as a safe haven for other Black LGBTQ plus people living in Brixton who were looking for a space where they could just be themselves. Though her businesses were successful for many years, challenges arose when Thatcher came to office in 1979, which brought on significant difficulties for marginalized communities like the Black and LGBTQ plus communities. And along with that and the Brixton uprisings, foot traffic around her business was impacted, and she was eventually forced to close her doors. However, being the consummate entrepreneur, she opened a cafe down the road, and that too became a safe haven for people in her community. However, unfortunately, Pearl continued to have financial difficulties, especially following the 1985 Brixton uprisings, which forced her to close her cafe doors soon after. Of course, this was quite an emotional and heavy experience for Pearl, and she stumbled across a new outlet, art. Initially, she started by creating drawings on the back of envelopes to express her gratitude to those who supported her during tough times, but her artistic journey bloomed from there. This initial foray into art sparked her passion for this mode of communication and expression, and her friends encouraged her by providing her with materials to create more art. By the late 1980s, her work gained recognition, being exhibited at venues such as the 198 Gallery and the Almeida Theater. Through her artistry, Pearl emerged as a visionary outsider artist, known for creating works that reflected her personal experiences and the world around her. Though much of her art remains stored in museums or is held by private collectors, community members who supported her by purchasing her artwork discreetly cherished her pieces as treasured memories. In 1990, Pearl's art was featured in the London Fire Brigade calendar. Regarded as a visual poet by Monica Kinley, a leading advocate for outsider art, Alcock achieved mainstream recognition shortly before her death when her work was included in Tate Britain's first outsider art exhibition in 2005. Despite her critical acclaim, only one of Pearl's works sold at auction, a piece called The Thigala or Tugela River, in 2012. Alcock passed away on May 7, 2006, at the age of 72, still creating art near her previous establishments on Railton Street. Her funeral was attended by many who appreciated her contributions to both the art world and the community. She was honored with a retrospective at the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester in 2019. And today, through her art stories and the memories of those who knew her well, Pearl Alcock continues to inspire others to live fearlessly, and her legacy lives on. And that's the story of Pearl Alcock. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a little something. And again, another person we all should know about, so take some time to look her up and learn more about her. Now, the final person I want to tell you all about is Dr. Cecil Belfield Clarke of the UK. So Dr. Cecil Belfield Clarke, one of the UK's first Black doctors, was a truly remarkable figure in UK medicine during the first half of the 20th century. In addition to his work in medicine, he was also a passionate civil rights activist at a time when the so-called color bar, an informal yet pervasive system of racial discrimination, enabled Black and minority ethnic people in the UK to be treated as second-class citizens. Cecil Belfield Clarke was born on April 12, 1894 in Barbados. His early life was marked by a strong educational foundation, which began at Combermere School, a well-regarded institution in his hometown. He went on to win an Ireland scholarship to study medicine at Cambridge and arrived in London on September 28, 1914, at the age of 22, just after the outbreak of World War I. Clarke went to St. Catherine's College, Cambridge, and was awarded a BA in 1917. A devoted member of the college community, he endowed a prize for natural sciences, which was first awarded in 1955 and is still awarded to this day by the college. After writing board exams that qualified him as a physician and surgeon with a specialty in public health, Clarke began practicing in London at the University College Hospital in 1923. Then about a year later, he was practicing at 112 Newington Causeway in the Elephant and Castle area, where he would practice for the rest of his professional career. He practiced in this area throughout World War II, despite the heavy bombardment of the area, some three decades before the Windrush generation started to arrive in the UK. Dr. Clarke would be immortalized in medical history because of his development. He created something called the Clarke's Rule, which is still in use in medicine today, to accurately calculate the correct dose of medicine to be administered to children aged 2 to 17. A committed Pan-Africanist, Clarke was one of the founders of the civil rights organization called the League of Colored Peoples, along with another South London medical practitioner, the Jamaican-born Harold Moody. This organization was formed in 1931, and its early members included C.L.R. James, Jomo Kenyatta, Una Marson, and Paul Robeson. Clarke was elected as the first chair of the House Committee of Agri House, a hostel established in London in 1934 for students from Africa and the Caribbean. Throughout the 1930s, Clarke was also active in the International African Service Bureau with C.L.R. James and George Padmore, a London-based organization intended to address issues relating to Africa and the African diaspora. He was also active in the West African Students Association, WASU, which helped influence Ghanaian nationalism. Through WASU, Clarke became acquainted with the American Pan-Africanist W.E.B. Du Bois, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst holds Du Bois's papers, which include extensive correspondence with Clarke. Clarke was active in Ghanaian medical circles. He was the chairman of the Ghana Medical Advisory Committee and wrote letters to the British Medical Journal, the BMJ, about independent Ghana's first medical school, the University of Ghana Medical School. It's also noteworthy that Clarke himself was a homosexual man, though he and his partner were always very discreet because homosexuality was not decriminalized in Britain until 1967. His lifelong partner was Pat Walker, whom was Clarke's employee. He was Clarke's secretary, and by at least 1939 they were living together in Clarke's house in Barnet, which Clarke called Belfield House. Clarke retired from his medical practice in 1965 and died on November 28, 1970, just 5 years later, at the age of 76. Clarke's work and contribution to medicine in Britain was almost lost to history, but A few passionate researchers and members of the Black community started to look into him, and now his work is being paid tribute to across the country. In April of 2023, a blue plaque honoring Clark was placed on a building near the site of his practice, and that plaque was sponsored by Black History Walks in collaboration with the Nubian Jack Community Trust. Also, the prize that Clark endowed at St. Catherine's College in Cambridge continues to be awarded. Clark was also one of the Black Londoners featured in an exhibition at the Cumming Museum in 2008 entitled Keep Smiling Through, Black Londoners on the Home Front, 1939 to 1945, and he was also one of the figures highlighted by the LGBT History Month UK in February of this year in connection to this year's theme, which was medicine. And that is the story of Cecil Belfield Clark, who is also sometimes just known as Belfield Clark. Again, somebody we all should know about, to take some time to do a little Googling and learn about his contribution to medicine in the UK and beyond. All right, we're at the end of today's show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I really appreciate you being here with me, and I hope that you enjoyed what I shared today and you learned a little something about some Black historical figures that you want to learn more about. Till next time, please take care of you and be well. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.